The Dawn Spire stands at the edge of the Transient Isles, a frontier outpost of elven civilization within the realm of light. These colossal, lazily drifting islands of black stone hang in the air high above an endless azure sea. Many years ago, a powerful chaos sorcerer sought to bring these island havens crashing down into the ocean. He employed foul sorceries to warp and corrupt a shard of pure realmstone, creating the cursed artifact known as the Stone of Falling Skies. This profound creation radiated gravity-twisting power great enough to disrupt the primordial magic that held the Transient Isles aloft. 2 great island sanctuaries were lost to the depths before the mages of the Eldritch Council managed to slay the sorcerer and disrupt the energy of the cursed lodestone. Yet, for all the power of the elven mages, they could not destroy it. With the fate of their homeland in the balance, 3 great archmages made the ultimate sacrifice. Together, they entered a spell trance, combining their potent magics in order to suppress the waves of gravitational force emitted by the Stone of Falling Skies. None of them would ever wake from this reverie. The Dawn Spire was built to house this artifact and the 3 honored mages, and a guard made up of the Transient Isles' most elite warriors was created to protect it. Yet, despite this formidable obstacle, cruel eyes in the dark corners of the realms remain fixed on the stone, planning for the day they will harness its fell power for themselves.
Lord of the Swarm. Warlord Ripstick clambered onto the rock, scampering over 2 prostrate slave rats, who groaned audibly as his claws dug into their exposed backs. Normally he would have opened their throats for daring to voice such displeasure, but he was somewhat distracted for the moment. His warriors were being slaughtered. They swarmed the enemy spearmen, scrabbling and biting and hissing as they tried to get past the elves' guard and sink their blades into a exposed neck or an unwary back. The elves were too well drilled for such an approach. Using 2 clusters of rock outside the tower to funnel the Skaven assault, they kept shoulder to shoulder, shields raised and locked tight together. Their long spears flashed out, gleaming in the sunlight, and opened throats or drove deep into vital organs. Every shining warrior that fell claimed several Skaven lives in return. Good, muttered Ripsnick, nodding in satisfaction. These were odds he could accept. He turned and hopped off his perch, landing heavily on his unfortunate slaves.
Send in the rat ogres, he shrieked. Quick, fast, smash and tear. Push them from the tower.
He could accept a few hundred dead pack rats. They were easy enough to replace, but the longer he waited, the longer the elves had to reorganize and counterattack. He ground his fangs impatiently. He must take the stone quickly, or more stinking long-ears would come. Deep guttural bellows came from behind. He turned to see Rat Ogres barrel forwards, rippling muscles twitching beneath scarred and patched fur. Clan rats scattered with squeaks of terror as the monsters lumbered forwards towards the elves, swatting aside anything in their way. One of the ogres picked up an unfortunate black-furred wretch and squeezed. Ripsnick snickered at the sound of cracking bones and watched the ogre hurl the broken corpse at the line of elven spearmen, knocking 2 warriors to the floor. The elves reacted to this new threat with impressive speed. The front ranks pushed forwards and held their spears low, whilst those behind raised their own weapons, presenting the enemy with a wall of gleaming spear tips. That was not nearly enough to hold back the mindless rage of the mutated abominations. They battered aside the spears and smashed into the ranks of the elves, swiping and punching with those mighty fists, crushing breastplate and skull with every swing. One lifted a struggling elf into the air, its muscles bunched and rippled as it tore him in 2. Blood splattered across the creature's snout and dribbled down its chest. The elf line rippled, faltered just a step. It was time to join the fray.
Forward, wretches,
he shrieked, brandishing his trusty cleaver and spear.
We kill the Long-Ears, and we take the Elfstone for ourselves. Glory for the Skaven! Glory for Warlord Ripsnick!
The engineer Ikrel ambled past, bent back and sour-whiskered as usual. His gun crews followed, scorch-furred rats in thick leather coats, wearing brass goggles and long-nosed gas masks that made them look like some strange species of beetle. Behind them they hauled strange contraptions, warp-fire cannons and poison globe mortars. Ripsnick sneered in disgust and hacked up a wet clump of something unrecognizable, which he spat disdainfully on the floor. How he hated the arrogant Clanskirri, with their stinking engines of war and their wizened, weakling little metal shapers. He longed to open Ekril's scorch-marked throat, but sadly he needed the engineer alive a little longer.
Don't get throat cut, Ikril, he snarled. Don't let Long-Ears cut off your ugly head. Ripsnick needs you alive. Needs you to steel-hide that elfy stone they keep up there.
He jabbed a filthy claw at the marble tower looming overhead. According to his spies, that was where the Long-Ears kept their greatest treasure, a magic stone that could bring mountains tumbling down and tear great cities from the sky. That was an artifact that should belong to Clans Verminus, an artifact that should belong to mighty Ripsnick. Unfortunately, he needed the warp magic of Clanskirri to secure it. Ekril's engineers dragged the Negastone cage behind them. The magic dampening material radiated a unpleasant, dry metallic hint of static. It made Ripsnick's fur stand on end.
Worry for you, Ripsnick,
spat Ikril with a vicious smirk.
Worry for you.
Ripsnick almost regretted blackmailing the wretch into taking part in this raiding party. He consoled himself by imagining the infinite agonies he would inflict on the stunted engineer once he had outlived his usefulness. A chorus of high-pitched squeals of panic distracted him from his reverie. A griffin dropped screeching from the sky, a long-eared rider in white upon its back. The creature cut through the ranks of Ripsnick's verminous horde, and he cursed as he saw torn and bloody Skaven tossed like ragdolls into the air.
"Forward!"
he shrieked.
"Forward!"
His warriors scampered towards the enemy, and he followed along at a safe distance, his mewling slave rats providing a shield of flesh about him. The ground shook. Ripsnick's ears flattened, and he felt the tingle of warning sense in his limbs. The sour smell of fear spore rose above the blood and terror of the battle, and the rabble to his left began to squeal and clamber over each other in an attempt to flee. The elven cavalry struck with the force of a falling star. Clad in blinding silver mail, lances tipped with fluttering banners of blue, the horse riders smashed through the disorganized Skaven flank, leaving chaos and carnage in their wake. Ripsnick cursed. The momentum of the initial charge played out. The riders were hacking and slashing their way through the milling vermin. They were close now, too close for his liking, and his cursed slave rats were fleeing. He would skin them alive for such treachery. An elven rider came at him, lance lowered, murder in his eyes. Ripsnick kicked the legs out from under the Skaven next to him, sending the unfortunate creature tumbling onto the rider's mount. There was a shriek, abruptly cut off, and the elf in the saddle struggled to readjust his horse. Ripsnick darted forward, viper-quick, and sank his cleaver into the horse's neck. It reared, gurgling blood and whinnying pitifully as the rider lost his grip on the lance, and he struggled to stay in the saddle. Ripsnick aimed his rusted halberd at the long-ear's neck and felt it slide past bone and slice into meat with a satisfying crunch. The lifeless body toppled from the saddle, and a moment later the dying horse collapsed upon its fallen rider. The Skaven lord stepped up to the dead elf and swung his polearm down.
"Kill the Long-Ears!"
he cried, holding aloft the rider's severed head to the cheers of his raiders.
"Take their heads for Ripsnick, and take their Elfstone too."